Hello, welcome back to the second part of this gesture sculpting tutorial. This will be a shorter one, 23 minutes or something like that. And this is primarily me working without the model. Potentially this bit right at the start is still with the model, but 90% of this will be without. I have remeshed it. And yeah, not to a super low res, and I've not done I've not worried about the topology or anything like that. Like you can make your life easier if you throw in some topology to ensure that that your topologies flow in the direction of your sculpt. It's going to make sculpting easier. It's going to make smoothing areas out easier as well. And potentially, I recorded this with R5, and R6 has just come out, and it looks like the remesh is working even nicer right off the bat. So yeah, you might get lucky. I whatever. I mean, I couldn't really, I just remeshed it so I have some low subdivision levels, some high subdivision levels, so I can change stuff at a lower level. But I'm really not concerned about topology too much at this point. Or at any point during this process. I don't care. So, yeah, I'm just trying to figure out what I'm doing here. Basically, this, what you're seeing me do now is working much more in the way that I would work normally. Or, if I was working on, if this was a concept for a film or something like that. I'm thinking of masses. Rather than contours. That's the big difference. With the model, I'll be looking, let's say, from a front view, and I'll be thinking, right, what are the contours here? What are the rhythms here? And the risk when you're focused too much on your contours is that they don't make sense as masses. So you get a sculpture that works well from 4 viewpoints, but not from 8, let's say, or not from top down, not from bottom up. So yeah, I mean here you can see I'll be looking right up at the sculpt, or right down, and and sometimes it can be when you've got a live model, if you wanted to look at those angles on the model, it could be kind of inappropriate, So you have to study your anatomy, study the forms, and have a good idea of what you would expect those forms to be. And whilst I think there's an awful lot to be said for working from life, and I sort of went over this in the previous video. There's also an awful lot to be said for working from your imagination as well. Working from what or even you could whip out an anatomy book at this point and study those forms. Just to make sense, just to make sure that they, that they make sense without the model, so that with fresh eyes you look at it and it makes sense. And also to make sure that the sculpt is what you want it to be. So you should never be a slave to the model. This is not what being an artist is about. So making the sculpture what you want it to be, and then when you do go back to working with the model, that's what I'm doing here. I have a 3-hour session with the model, and then with 2 3-hour sessions, and in between those, just having a little sculpt, just cleaning things up and finding, like here you can see I'm finding the epicondyles of the humerus, finding to describe the angle and rotation of that upper arm, to find all you'll see throughout this video I'm focused on bony landmarks much more than I am on the muscles and things. And then when I go back to the model, then I will then I can appraise the decisions I've made with the model there and go, well, actually, what, the idea that I came up with, the way I want to represent this form, to me it makes sense more than it does in life. You shouldn't be a slave to nature, I don't think. Certainly if you look at pre-19th century artists and sculptors, there was, always a stylized thing. The Greeks, more than anyone, I would say. So yeah, you can go back and you can say, well, yeah, this decision I made, I prefer it to what it is in life, because in life, it's a really strange thing, like all the anatomy is believable because it's real and it works and it's functional, but it's confusing to look at, in this hypothetical case that I've made up. So, in this case, I want something much simpler and that flows, that doesn't interrupt the flow of light, which doesn't interrupt the way that you read the sculpture, the way that you're able to, move around it. Let's say the way your eye is able to move across the surface. That could be one thing. Or you could look at it and go back to the model and be like, wow, well, I made this particular muscle mass or these particular bony landmarks exactly the way that I've known them to be in an anatomy book. But now I see on the model, actually they have their own nuance, and they're showing things that that I just wouldn't have expected. Potentially the muscles. Let's say the muscles in the leg are just acting in a way they look much more tense. They have their own shapes. You're seeing the tendons pop out. You're seeing parts of muscle that you wouldn't expect, and you're like, yeah, you know what? I'll take that for the standing leg. And I'll use it to show that this leg is bearing all of the weight of the figure. And then when I go to the relaxed leg, I'll make sure it has none of that stuff and it feels really soft and really relaxed. And these are all design decisions that are part of what makes your sculpture, and doesn't make it a 3D scan of a model or a live cast of a model, which is something that is accurate but artistically vapid. So yeah, here I'm working the face, and this is all just made up for this. For what I'm doing, I don't think it's important to get a likeness of the model, and this doesn't. The model, by the way, I can't remember if I mentioned this in the previous video. She's a ballet dancer, very tall, very thin. That's the body type. And if you go to my Vimeo videos or my blog. I did a time-lapse charcoal drawing of her over several weeks, so you can see there. You can see, get a different view of the body and see how she looks if you're so inclined. And if you're not, that's also acceptable. So yeah, here just accentuating the sternocleidomastoid, the choker muscle of the neck. Which, if you're looking left, the one on your right side is really going to pop out, and vice versa. So that, and where it attaches to the sternum, to the top of the rib cage, finding that is going to tell you a lot about the turn of the head. So that's why I'm looking for that. And always would on it. You'll always see it on a sculpture with the head turned. And yeah, so on the face, I'm sort of just I'll briefly talk about the bony landmarks and stuff that I'm looking for here, because it's the so here I'm looking for the upper spiny border of the scapula, roughing in a bit of deltoid and a slight thing for the teres major there, but they're secondary to these bony points. There's the acromion process that comes around and it butts up against the clavicle. And so those two bony structures together will tell me everything I need to know about the shoulder girdle. And if I find them, the muscles attached to them, right? So you have those, and you just kind of string the muscles between them. Like the teres major that I was touching on before. It's it's kind of it's starting on the bottom of the scapula, and it's diving underneath, and it's grabbing kind of on the humerus around the front. But as long as I know where my humerus is and I know where my scapula is, it's just pretty much a straight line between those. Yeah, here like I mentioned before, just working in masses, making sure that my drawing, that my sculpture works in the round, rather than just in 4 viewpoints. Trying to find all the bony points of the elbow there. We've really got 3 that we'd want to look for. The olecranon process, sorry, the olecranon of the ulnar, which is the spike of the elbow, and then the lateral and medial epicondyles of the humerus. Those 3 points are going to make a kind of triangle that's going to tell us everything we need to know about the elbow. You know, is it bent, extended? Are the muscles around it tense and pulling away from the landmarks? You know, all of this stuff is revealed when we find the bones. The feet, yeah, I mean, feet and hands, it's going to be so difficult to not get a sort of just blobby kind of mass, you know, at this stage. And you know, and again, all I can say is find the bones, find that skeletal structure. You know, on the top of the foot you have the extensors of the toe. I guess the extensor digitorum brevis, I think. It's a muscular mass that wraps around from the outside to the inside, kind of pointing towards the big toe. It's gonna give you a lot of rhythm on the foot, so study that and look for that. But you know, like I say, you're laying it on top of bones, right? So you find the bones first. You know, and the toes, they're pretty much bones. I mean, there's no muscles there. It's, you know, you have tendons running down them, but you study the bones and study the rhythm of the bones. You know, the same for the hands, but the toes especially, because I think a lot of us have sort of flat, sausagey, uninteresting toes, and you'll never see that in you'll never see that in classical sculpture. You know, you'll always find this crazy rhythm in the toes as they arch up and flatten out and then dive back down again and then flatten out where the toenails are. It's a very sort of exciting journey along a foot that most of us don't have in real life. But you know, that's what we're doing is not real life, I suppose. I feel like there was some point when I wanted to make a point and then I drifted off and I can't remember what that point was, but I'll come back to it. Whatever it was. I just scaled the head up there. It's difficult because, you know, the model is long and thin, so, you know, naturally you have a set of proportions in your head that, you know, or maybe you have, if you've studied proportions, that you go, right, this is this is what I expect them to be. And when you have a model like this who's very tall and thin, that can really throw you off. And instinctively there I felt the head was a little too small. And then I think the face later on, maybe when I've got the model up there, I even make it bigger again. So potentially I got that a bit wonky to start with. And I certainly would not look at my sculpture in terms of, you know, starting with the big shapes and working smaller and smaller and refining. Well, I mean, kind of, you do. You sort of have to. But I'm always thinking of, I can go back and make sure the big stuff works, make sure the big gestures work, make sure the big proportions work, make sure those rhythms are working. And that's one gift that we have working with software like this, that gives us the freedom to do that, to just take a head and scale it up, for example. It means I never need to feel precious about anything I've done. But even if you're working in clay, I would say, you know, or in charcoal or pencil paint, whatever it is, I would say, you know, when you're feeling precious about your work, that's a real danger. Because, you know, probably nothing is as important as these big things. You know, that's going to be a person's first impression of your work. You know, when they walk into a room and they see your sculpt or whatever, they're not going to be interested in the pores and things. Yeah, the hair. Yeah, the hair's a good. Oh well, I'm working the face. Let's talk about the face. But you know, like I mentioned before, I'm doing the minimum amount that I can to get away with with having something in there that reads, but there isn't a fully sculpted, defined face. This is the thing when you move from a kind of sketch thing to starting to refine something. That's a very dangerous area, because when you have something that's clearly a sketch, people read it as a sketch. When I say sketch, it could refer to a ZBrush sculptor, it could refer to a drawing or whatever. But if you just do some really rough hatch marks to say the face is in shadow, no one's going to look at it and go, "What are those lines across the face? I don't understand." Is it the way the light's falling? Is it what is that? Is it a line gouged the face? They'll read it as a sketch, right? But as soon as you move that to the next level and you start putting in a bit of eyes and mouth and whatever, then that's a dangerous area, because you're saying you're not saying anymore that this is a sketch. You're saying this is the next level up. And if you get it slightly wrong, what you were hoping was a nice serene expression, it's like the face of a serial killer, and that can be in the tiniest accent of an eye. So this is a sort of dangerous area when you move into, and you want to be aware of it. For some people it doesn't seem to be a problem. Very, very good people. I mean, you look at John Sargent's work, and God, there's barely anything there at all in some ways, but it's not a sketch. Everything is there that has to be there, and nothing is there that doesn't have to be there. Important, I think, for us to think about and to study, because, of course, when we're working professionally, everything has to be there. You can't go to the VFX super director or whoever it is that you're you're showing your work to and say, "Oh, well, I didn't sculpt the fingernails because I didn't think that was bringing anything to the sculpt." That's not. We have to create a reality. I'm talking, for visual effects guys, for games guys, the same, TV guys, I'm sure. So we always have to create everything. And, in the final product, oftentimes you won't see it because it's whizzing across the screen, motion blurred. But we have to create everything in the off chance that you do see it. And it's a very different philosophy to what I would think should be your mindset if you're doing a sculpt like this, or, a sculpt that is a sculpt for the sake of being a sculpture, not for the sake of being in a film or whatever. And because we have to let go of the need to describe everything, which in a sculpt is going to come across as kind of ostentatious and unnecessary. And so I would say study these guys. The Impressionists, great example. John Sargent, like I mentioned before. Rodin, who I guess I'll probably talk a bit too much about, but is almost you could consider the sculpture side of Impressionism. Or Michelangelo stuff. It was the practice in his time to make everything polished and finished, but luckily for us, sometimes he just couldn't be asked. Most of the time he couldn't be. And, you get some beautiful results where, like his slaves, for example, that are just, they're part rock, they're part human, they're coming out of, they're escaping from the rock. And it's, it's really quite a breathtaking effect, and it's, it's something that, I think we can really take and learn from for the work that we do, like for example, where her arm is making contact with her body here on the back, but also the other arm around the front. Do we want to show the the arm as a completely separate thing from the back? Yeah, maybe not. That's up to us to decide. What would happen if that arm didn't wrap all the way around, but it really blended into the back at certain points? Would a person look at that and go, well, he hasn't sculpted that very well because, he thinks the arm blends into the back, whereas clearly it doesn't. They're not going to look at that and think that. It was like I was saying with the sketch thing. There's things that people will look at and they will accept it as an artistic choice. So things like this are a really good chance, a good opportunity for us to explore these things that are pertinent to the work that we do. you know, essentially what is the minimum amount of work that we can get away with, or what is the minimum amount of work for the maximum effect, or how do we reduce distracting things and get people to focus only on what we want them to focus on. And those things are pertinent, you know, not only to this sort of sculpture, but to any creative endeavor, I would think. So yeah, this is all still without the model, you know. I wouldn't, you know, with having 3 or 6 hours for a sculpt or something, I wouldn't generally work the hands or face from life, just because, you know, you kind of like in for a penny, in for a pound sort of thing. You know, like once you start going down that route, it doesn't end. You know, I could spend this entire time sculpting just a hand, and it still wouldn't be that great in terms of finished sculpt. So, you know, all I'm trying to do is show, you know, I mean, I took the, you know, the positioning of the hand from what the model was doing, and then I just want to find the minimum amount that I can to show what that hand is doing, and to show, you know, that the hand is made of bone, where the bone is showing, where it's, you know, where it's not, where it's going to a fleshy mass. Finding those things, and if I can tell that story, that's the story I want to tell of the hand, and then I'll move on. Finding, you know, a bit more of the rib cage. Again, this is without the model. I don't know if you see it on the model, but you know, she's leaning over towards her left, so on her right side, the rib cage is going to be exposed and pushing out a bit more. So I sort of want to accentuate that. And the more I find of the rib cage, the more I'm going to describe of the pose. And yeah, I mean, these are sort of rhythms that I'm looking for, I suppose. You know, or curves, sweeping arcs, I guess, is what I was trying to show there. Sorry, I wish I'd been a bit more eloquent talking about it, but I didn't remember doing that. Took myself by surprise. I'll be more prepared next time. Knees are, it can be a nightmare, you know. I'm not sure how much I'll do with the knees here, but again, simplify them to their bony masses. So you have the patella, you know, the kneecap, which is going to be always married to the tibia, to the lower leg. So we'll stay the same distance to that relative. The same distance relative to it, whether the knee is straight or bent. So find that, and then, you know, the tendon of the quadriceps is flowing over that, and it's grabbing onto the nose of the tibia. There's kind of a bump at the front of the tibia, so there's a flow that goes over it, points to the tibia, and then either side of there you have 4 bony points. You have the condyles of the femur and of the tibia. So you've got the patella, the bony point in the middle, and then 2 at the top either side, 2 at the bottom either side. So that's 5 bony points there. And then below the patella you've got the nose of the tibia, and then to the outside you've got the head of the fibula. Which look these things up. I'm sorry I can't sort of just rotate around my sculpt to illustrate those things. But 7 bony landmarks of the knee. Stephen Rogers Peck has an amazing book for memorizing these things and stuff, and in it he describes it as like the 5 on a dice. Those are your 5, and then below that you've got the tibia. I think it's the tibial tuberosity is what it's called, and then you've got the head of the fibula. Sorry, and what it's frozen on screen here. It's showing the figure 8 gesture I was talking about in the previous thing, or it's trying to. It just looks kind of messy, but if you watch me as I do it, I'm finding that figure 8, you know, and a figure 8 is a very nice compositional tool to use in sculpture because it's like an infinite, you know, an infinity sign. So it keeps the person engaged in your sculpture. And then, you know, hopefully the gaze of the eyes in this case is going to give them a get out to walk around it. but you want to be in control of how people are looking at your work, the composition of it. So if you had an arm just poking out into the side, you've got to be aware that people are probably going to read that arm, and they may read it all the way along to the finger and then drop off the end and walk away. So yeah, it's always worth thinking about the flow of the composition, because that's essentially a big part of your sculpt, and you want to be accentuating that all the time. She's looking like she's got kind of a long face at this point. I think I changed that. I hope that I do. Again, just the minimum that I could possibly find here. The thing is, if I really try and finish this face, that's going to grab someone's attention as they're looking at it. And so if I really want it finished, then I better properly finish it, because people are going to look at it and they're going to praise it as finished. I want it to feel as finished as the rest of the sculpture, in this case. That's not always the decision you want to make. Sometimes you want to have areas that just float away and disappear. And you look again at the way Michelangelo worked. Sometimes he has an amazingly polished, finished area of his sculpt, and then other areas are just like he's barely spent 20 minutes on it. And that's a really beautiful effect. And again, it's a way of controlling where people are looking. I guess this video's about to finish, so thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next one. I hope.